To my millennial audience, if I ask you to imagine the look of the 1980s, what do you picture? Maybe this comes to mind. A mental image of bright, colorful, low graphic light grids, wireframes, and neon colored skies. Maybe something more tropical. Palm trees, beaches, pinks and oranges set over a segmented sun. What if I told you that's not the 80s? Kind of surprising, isn't it? But not if you take a short look into what really made up the style of the 1980s. Hey there viewers, I'm Chris Vapor, and today I want to show you the origins of the 1980s aesthetic, as well as some surprising influences that cemented the look as the recognizable theme of the era. So let's get started, and tune in yesterday to the 80s aesthetic. To my older viewers, if I asked you the same question, you'd probably conjure up patterns like this. Or what about this? This one? Maybe even this wild look. This might be the definitive look of the decade, but do you know where it comes from, how it spread, and what it influenced? Let's take a look by starting with Memphis. No, not Memphis, Tennessee. The Memphis Group, a team of designers based in Milan, Italy that came together in 1981. Though the team was primarily made up of Italian designers and architects, the group also comprised of members from around the world, including Japan, Spain, and America. The Memphis Group set out with a goal to make a creative alternative to the current modernism approach of design, incorporating bold, bright, clashing colors and geometric shapes on top of more shapes to create complicated patterns with their pieces. They also created many furniture pieces with these designs in mind, prioritizing creativity and an artistic expression over functionality. So let's answer some questions about the Memphis Group. Firstly, how did a group of Italian architects end up naming themselves after a town in the US? Well, apparently, in their first meeting, the song Stuck Inside a Mobile with the Memphis Blues Again by Bob Dylan was stuck on repeat, inspiring them to name themselves the Memphis Group. Who was at the head of this creative revolution? Ettore Sottsass, an Italian architect and designer known for his work on the Elia 9003, which netted Sottsass the Compasso d'Oro Award in 1959, as well as his designs of office equipment and electronics. One notable piece being the Valentine typewriter in 1969, a striking design as compared to the more hefty commercial machines before it. Sottsass coveted bold and colorful designs, as opposed to the mass-produced and uninspiring items from the modernism movement of a post-World War II world. Even going as far as saying, quote, "I didn't want to make any more consumerist products, because it was clear that the consumerist attitude was quite dangerous." Sottsass and the Memphis Group spent most of the 1980s shocking the art world with their wild designs and faux chic, a term meaning to imitate the look of something more valuable. This was very fitting for their work, as seen in their furniture line, where cheaper materials were used by the group to complement their radical designs. The cherry on top was the names of their pieces, often borrowing the names of ritzy hotels, like this one, named the Ritz Desk, and less than ideal working space that nonetheless took the public by storm, incorporating their striking motifs with less than high-class materials. The group continued to release likewise low-function, high-art pieces for the majority of the 1980s. Although their art excited people who had never seen such things, it was often met with negative messages from critics of the era, who much more preferred the set rules of the modernism movement. Throughout the decade, the Memphis Group continued to garner large, enthusiastic gatherings for their exhibitions. This passionate reception led to their work becoming vastly influential in many aspects of the era. Everything from the fashion scene, home appliances, especially music videos. But the Memphis Group wasn't the only significant force behind the defining look of the 80s. They had some help in the form of another huge revolution at the time. A revolution of television broadcasting. A revolution of rock and roll. That's right, I'm talking about On the night of August 1st, 1981, the New York-based music television channel was launched, with a focus of music videos and music content, first airing with a broadcast of the Bugles' Video Killed the Radio Star, a poignantly direct message that MTV was here to stay, although in the beginning this wasn't as plain to see as it is today. The concept of a video providing visual story to emphasize a song wasn't as common as it is today, with few music groups taking the time and fewer record companies spending the money to produce such music videos. With the slim pickings for content at their debut, MTV began to struggle to retain their audience, with frequent repeats of the same videos and songs. Despite the channel's struggles soon after launch, it nonetheless changed the landscape of music as we know it, showing artists and record companies just how profitable it was to produce striking and interesting videos as a means of showcasing their brands and bands to an eager audience. With new at the time artists such as Madonna and Duran Duran finding success from widespread exposure on MTV, as well as bringing more well-known bands like Tina Turner and ZZ Top back to the forefront of the top 100 lists by injecting new life into their longtime fans via music videos. By the middle of the decade, MTV had greatly influenced a lot of media at the time, not just music, but also movies, commercials, and television in general. This influence on broadcast media and the film industry had a profound effect on the style of the 1980s, thanks to the channel's use of similar visual elements as that of the Memphis Group, as seen in their colorful pattern and scratchy graphics, as well as the music videos themselves, borrowing aspects of the current art revolution started by Ettore Sottsass. The combined effect of both the art and music world bolstering the new wild chic, known as the Memphis movement, meant that a person living in the 1980s was surrounded by the bright and angular aesthetic. So now you know what the 80s looked like and the origins of the flashy, eye-catching Memphis style. But the question still remains, where does this computerized, cyberpunk-looking design come from? And why do young people today associate it with the 1980s? The aesthetic comes from the future, or rather, the past idea of the future, and has been brought back to life in the present. Most often called retrofuturism, this style isn't only relevant to the 1980s. Since the Industrial Revolution, people have had imaginative ideas of what the future might look like. More often than not, their ideas of advanced technology were simply a more capable version of their current technology. These ideas were brought to life by art, films, novels, and much more. If we look at what the technology of the 80s consisted of, you can start to see the similarities between this and this. With home computing still in its infancy, and the idea of three-dimensional representations of our world being illustrated by simpler computers as compared to today, we can see where the trends of low graphic renderings, combined with the vivid styles and colors of the Memphis Group, began to take place. But like I said, images such as this are a more modern take on the decades-old trend. This is known as vaporwave aesthetic, and was born out of a microgenre of online music of the same name around the 2010s. Known to be a retrospective criticism of consumerism and the faux glamour of capitalism, the music can debatably be compared to droning elevator music, or what you hear when a radio DJ drops a can of Pepsi onto their sound equipment, often sampling clips and bites of music and media, usually from the 1980s pop culture. Vaporwave created a resurgence in retro style, generally illustrated by a combination of modernized Memphis movement-inspired designs, blended together with the computerized graphics mentioned before. I'll be delving more into 1980s technological advancements in the future, but for now, this should help you understand the origin of vaporwave aesthetic and why it is regularly confused for authentic 1980s design. Since vaporwave is a modern concept, I won't be returning to the topic, but I hope you found this footnote interesting. In hindsight, many people may disagree with the pronounced taste of the 80s, criticizing the fashion choices the bold visual elements in media, and the audacious Memphis movement as a whole. But one thing is for certain, the era had a striking and lasting effect on all aspects of design at the time, and has influenced trends over the decades. It will most likely continue to shape the way people express themselves well into the future, as we can already see with the rise of Vaporwave, with its borrowing of retrofuturism and memorable patterns first popularized in the 1980s. Hey there viewers, I hope you liked this investigative video, taking a look into what created the defining style of the 1980s. And if you enjoy this kind of content, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel, and hit that bell icon so you won't miss out on a single totally radical video. I'm Chris Vapor, and I hope to see you next time on Channel None. And don't forget to tune in yesterday.